This is going to be the most craziest story in all of music history, and I don't even know if I believe it myself. Now, most people falsely accredit this story to the legendary musician Bob Dylan, but he actually was born 10 years after this. So as the story goes, it's just before midnight in 1931. Robert Johnson, a 20-year-old blues musician, is standing at the crossroads of Highways 61 and 49 of the Mississippi Delta. The exact day, month, or even year is highly debated amongst conspiracy theorists. But Robert is standing in this exact location at this exact time for a reason. He has an appointment, and this appointment is with the devil himself. So as the clock strikes midnight, a huge gust of wind blows Robert almost off his feet. He's trying to compose himself, and then when he looks up, he sees this big dark shadow wearing a large black hat. Robert is looking at this giant being of complete darkness in a total state of disbelief. I mean, he did show up for this meeting, but I guess he just didn't think it was really going to happen. So it's at this point the devil reaches out his giant hand and he's signaling for Robert to pass the guitar that's strapped behind his back over to him. Because after all, this is what this meeting is all about. So the devil tunes this old Gibson 6-string guitar and hands it back to Robert. It was at this point the meeting was over. The deal had been made. In exchange for musical talent, Robert had to trade his soul. Robert Leroy Johnson was born in Hazelhurst, Mississippi on May 8, 1911. Now, even the exact day is still kind of debated because of how long ago it was. People are just not really 100% sure. But what they do know is his mother, Julia Dodd, she had 10 children before little Robert would arrive. Now, the father Robert would know was a man named Charles Dodd. He was a sharecropper in Mississippi. And that's a farmer who rents land from landowners to grow crops, and essentially what he would do is he'd pay the rent in by giving them some of the crops that they harvested that year. But what Robert didn't know at the time was that his real father was a man named Noah Johnson. Now, Noah Johnson was a local plantation worker that Robert's mother Julia had an affair with. But just before Robert was born, his father Charles would actually be run out of town by very prominent white landowners. Although it was almost 50 years since the slaves had been freed after the Civil War, racial hatred in this time was still very much a thing, and Charles was very good at growing crops. He was making a lot of dosh, so they wanted him out of town. I don't know why. I mean, he's paying them rent with the crops, but I guess they wanted to keep the black man down. So Charles had to flee Mississippi, and he goes to Memphis, where he would actually change his name to Charles Spencer. It would be here where he would have to start rebuilding his life from scratch. Robert would stay with his mother for just a few years before joining his father in Memphis. His father had moved to the city, so little Robert would go to a local school with a lot more other students. It would be here where he would learn about popular music, and at the time it was like blues and jazz and swing and that sort of stuff. As Robert is growing into his teenage years, he starts learning the harmonica, and he gets pretty good at it. His older brother would start teaching him how to play the guitar, but he doesn't take to it as naturally as he did the harmonica. Before too long, Robert, now in his teenage years, would leave school and return back to Mississippi to live with his mother, who at this stage had met another man, and she'd actually married this guy, and his name was Will Dusty Willis. So a lot of people would actually refer to Robert as Little Dusty. While Robert is back in Mississippi, he starts working on the farms, but Robert dreamed of a life of not attending crops, but playing music on stage. When Robert was roughly 18 years old, he would meet a girl named Virginia Travis. And Virginia and Robert, they would get married, and Virginia would fall pregnant pretty quickly. Now, given the time, it's like the late 1920s, blues music was considered to be the devil's music by many folks around this time. So Virginia and her family were very much against Robert even playing the blues, much less performing it on stage as a professional musician. So he had to hang up the guitar for this period of time. But things would change very swiftly. In the lead up to the couple's child being born, Virginia would go and actually stay with her parents at their house to give birth. And the plan was for Robert to meet her there at a later date. But this is, I guess, where tragedy strikes, because when Robert arrives to, I guess, his in-laws' house, he is met with the devastating news that Virginia, as well as the baby, had both passed away during the birth, which this is actually pretty common back then. This is not, like today it's not as common, it still does happen, but back then it was super common. So Robert is absolutely crushed by this news. Like, the dreams he had of being a family man and raising kids, it was just stripped away from him in the matter of seconds, the second he arrived there. So something in Robert just switches. He decides to pursue music. Now, Mississippi at this time was popping off for blues players. So Robert, he would head to the local bars, guitar in hand. And this is where artists like Son House was playing. He was like a big musician back then in this area. And when he would finish playing, Robert would just grab his guitar, jump up on stage and just start performing. But the noise coming out of this guitar was boomy, it was loud, it was hardly musical. Son House himself would famously say, "It was such a racket you'd never heard. Get that guitar away from that boy. He's running people crazy with it." Robert would leave the area not long after, and he would be gone for roughly 2 years before returning around 1932. This time, Robert met up with Son House and a fellow musician in the club scene named Willie Brown. And when he started to play, when Robert got up on stage and started to play, jaws would drop to the floor. Robert Johnson was amazing. The master strokes on the chords he strummed rang out so beautifully. The precision of his finger picking was spot on, but his voice played in sync with the guitar. It was like working together in like this call and response type thing. And this was something that would become popular decades later. So he's well before his time. And nobody could understand how Robert had gotten so good in such a short amount of time. Like nobody could, they couldn't work it out. And Robert at this stage, he had remarried a woman named Carletta Craft. And the couple would have a child together that they named Claude, but not long afterwards, Carletta tragically passed away, and it is believed to have been due to childbirth complications. So we've got another issue with childbirth around that time. But the only difference in this case is the son actually survived. Claude would be raised by Carletta's family, and Robert would hit the road again. And this is where he ended up in Mississippi and playing before Son House and Willie Brown. So he had the child while he was away. But again, they're looking at Robert wondering, like, where has he gotten this skill from? They just couldn't fathom it. And what nobody knew was that after Carletta died, Robert Johnson had made a deal with the devil at the Mississippi Delta crossroads. From here, Robert Johnson has established himself as a legitimate musician amongst his peers. So he starts traveling from town to town and playing in clubs, and it's whilst on the road he would sit outside a store in town and play for tips. This is sort of like, I guess, to fund his travels. And it was while he was playing in these clubs that he would often meet a woman there and spend the night with her back at her place. So he's like getting free accommodation. But the problem here is some of these women were actually married. So Robert always had to be quick to move just in case their husbands came home. It seems there was like a trend of cheating back then, because Robert's own mother had an affair which, you know, he was born out of, and Robert is like sleeping around with married women. I mean, the 1930s, man. Robert's travels would take him far outside Mississippi to places like Chicago and New York. But everywhere he went, nobody really knew him that well. He had a few close friends who were like blues musicians, but even to them, there was like this wall up between them and him. To them, what they really knew about Robert, it was that he liked his whiskey and he liked his women. By 1936, Robert would record 29 songs over several weeks. Out of the 29 songs, a total of 16 would be released as singles. The other 13 songs were made up mostly of retakes of the songs that were handpicked and released. So the 13 songs that didn't make the album sort of got put on the shelf. From here, Robert would spend time playing in Memphis and Arkansas before landing in Greenwood, Mississippi in mid-1938. He would perform at several clubs around the area with fellow musicians and friends David Honeyboy Edwards and Sonny Boy Williamson. But it would be on the 14th of August when Robert, David and Sonny would perform at a juke joint connected to the Three Forks store on the outskirts of Greenwood. It would be here where things for Robert would take a tragic turn. While sitting at the bar sipping on some whiskey, he was asked to perform another song, but he couldn't. He said he was feeling ill. The man that ran the bar, allegedly Robert was sleeping with his wife. And unbeknown to Robert, he had laced his drink with mothballs, which was like a common poison at the time. Robert would be taken to a shotgun house, which is like a narrow building with many rooms that usually houses workers. And this place was called the Star of the West Plantation. It would be here Robert in agony. Just 2 days later, on August 16th, 1938, he would die at just the age of 27, making him one of the oldest people on the infamous 27 Club. And to this day, the mystery continues because there's like 3 reported grave sites for him. So even in death, his actual resting place is still, I guess, kind of in speculation. But can we solve this mystery? Can we solve the mystery behind the man? Did he meet with the devil? Was he actually murdered? And where is his actual burial place? So after Robert had first played in front of Son House when he was terrible, he had left the area for 2 years, and it's believed that he was actually searching for his biological father. He ended up in the area of Martinsville, where he actually met another man named Isaiah Zimmerman. And Isaiah was a really skilled guitarist. And it was through Isaiah that Robert actually learnt how to play. The pair would actually practice in cemeteries at night because obviously the time people looked at the blues as being the devil's music, so they wanted to go somewhere where there wasn't a lot of people around and they could make as much noise as they wanted. Now, when Robert married his first wife, Virginia Travis, and she had passed away with the baby, the family believed very strongly that because Robert played secular music, Virginia actually paid the divine punishment for it. They actually thought of him as selling his soul to the devil, so I guess he's carrying around all that guilt as well. So did Robert actually meet the devil at the crossroads? That's the big question. No, he didn't. In fact, the song that people point to as him admitting that he had met the devil at the crossroads is actually called Crossroads. And the lyrics to that song are, I went to the crossroads, fell down on my knees, asked the Lord above, have mercy now, save poor Bob if you please. So it's gospel if anything. Was Robert Johnson murdered for sleeping with another man's wife? That one is actually possible. That is really possible that that did happen. And this theory actually stems from David Honeyboy Edwards. He was there that night and he claimed to have seen it all unfold. And he even slaps the bottle that Robert was drinking out of his hand, to which Robert said never slap a bottle out of a man's hand while he was drinking. Like, he was determined to drink this what is believed laced bottle with mothballs, Robert was determined to drink it. And this came from the suspicious bartender, who it's believed that Robert was sleeping with his wife. The other theories is that Robert had congenital syphilis. So either way, I mean, the theories are, I guess, not that good, given the time. Like, nobody really knows, man. But where's Robert's gravesite? That one actually has been, it's been proven, and that was due to this. Robert Johnson was buried in Little Zion Cemetery in Greenwood, Mississippi, next to the star of the West Plantation where he died. Rosie Estridge, whose husband dug the grave, was present on the day. Delta Media Projects even interviewed her before her passing in 2006. So that's the story of Robert Johnson, the man Rolling Stones legendary guitarist Keith Richards accredited for really shaping popular music. And even many years after his passing, Robert Johnson would be crowned the king of the Delta blues. Go and listen to the music. It's pretty remarkable. I really like it, and I still think it holds up to this day. He even sang Sweet Home Chicago, which I didn't know that song even went that far back. But I might do more videos on 27 Club members. Let me know in the comments. Do you also think that Robert Johnson may have been murdered? I think there's a strong possibility. I mean, his friend was there, and that's what he said happened. So, I don't know. Anyway, I hope you liked the video. You stay safe out there in internet land.